I love following magician. It's so easy. All right, I got to start with a joke, or I'm really going to fuck this up. St. Peter's at the gate of heaven, and he really has to take a piss. And so he looks around, he sees Jesus, who as always is doing nothing. And he goes, could you spell me for a bit? You know, I got a kidney thing. I just, just 10 minutes. I'll be right back. And Jesus goes, yeah, sure, fine, okay. So Jesus gets up there, and he's at the gate, and Peter just goes, 10 minutes, nobody's going to show up, it'll be fine. But of course, no sooner is Jesus there by himself than an old man starts walking up the hill. And from the minute Jesus sees him, he goes, I know this guy. I don't know why, but I got a sense, I know him. And the closer he gets, the more Jesus goes, fuck, I know this guy. So he gets really, really close, and the old man's finally right there, and Jesus says, hello, stranger. Welcome. What's your name? And the old man looks up and he says, my memory went so many years ago. I don't really, I don't, and Jesus says, it's okay. We got a big book here. Give me a couple details, I can figure out who you are. So the old man goes, well, I used to work with wood. Yeah, I worked with wood. And I had a son. He was a marvelous son. He was full of love. And he believed in the truth. He thought the truth was the most important thing. The truth would set you free. And Jesus is getting all teary-eyed, and he goes, Dad? And the old man looks up and goes, Pinocchio? Okay, it's not a magic trick, but hey. All right. You're too kind. My fourth book is Do They Know I'm Running? And I started writing it in 2007. The third book was Blood of Paradise. And it takes place in El Salvador. And I wrote it because everything I read about organized crime in Central America was about gangs. And I'd been down there, and I knew that there's a mafia in Central America comprised of ex-military guys and business people, otherwise known as our friends in the hemisphere. Yes. And this just pissed me off royally. And I have a tendency to write books because I get pissed off. So I wrote Blood of Paradise about that. And as I was finishing it, it was 2006, like I said, 2007, when the immigration debate was happening, otherwise known as an orgy of bile. And you would listen to someone like Lou Dobbs talking about immigration, and while he's absolutely excoriating Latinos in every way he knows how, if you looked at the crawl at the bottom of the screen, there would be listing the names of the casualties back from Iraq, and you were astounded how many of those names were Latino. And it ends up that Latinos were dying and being wounded in battle in higher proportions than their proportion in the military as a whole. So I had my new thing to be pissed off about. And the reason I wrote these books is I wrote about El Salvador because I had fallen in love with a woman from El Salvador. And we had this wonderful affair until finally her English was good enough and my Spanish was good enough for us to realize we had very little in common. But we still remained very good friends. But what I realized getting to know her and her family was that so many Latino families are what they call mixed status, which is there's always, there's a citizen, there's a legal resident, there's an illegal resident, there's, and they're all mixed together. So every family is always afraid that somebody's going to be torn away. And that's what this next thing is, this segment I'm going to read is about. The story, as we meet, we're at a party. And the two main characters are Godo for Godofredo and Happy, who is his cousin. And they call him Happy because he's never happy. And his real name is Pablo. And they've been to this party. Godo has met a girl. That's the reason he came. Her name was Lorena Sanchez. He's totally smitten with her. He's hit her up all night, played it kind of cool, played it kind of hot, done everything. Finally walks her out to her car, gets her phone number on his hand in her eyebrow pencil. He's thrilled. So he gets completely shit-faced. While Happy, because Happy is a very dark guy. And he hasn't gotten together with the women. He's been hanging out with the boys. But now it's time to leave, and that's where the story picks up. A little after midnight, Happy appeared. All he said was, "Give me your keys, Manudo." Now, Manudo is Salvadoran caliche, or slang for drunk. Godo scored the pot on the way out, announced to mellow his drift, cupped from Pucci, the crowd's preferred Marquinero. That was what the brown-toned locos were good for, crank and weed, that and stealing shit. Bumming papers off him too, Godo rolled a number, toking away as Happy drove. The night was cold and still, no moon. The bud turned him philosophical. He said, "You know, cabron, way you act. Women gonna think you're a mariquita, a faggot. Gonna think you learned to fuck in jail." Happy's hand sailed across the car, snatching the doob away. "Who are you now, the prince of pussy?" Godo reached over to grab back his blunt. "Don't be dissing my girl, cabron." Happy fended him off. "Zora flaca, skinny slut." "I mean it, fuckface." Godo tried again to snag back the joint. Happy dodged the grab. Godo persisted, a blur of hands. Then Happy launched a crack-back elbow, landing the blow square and hard. A clap of searing white. Godo reached for his nose. A dollop of blood stained his pants. His eyes watered from the pain. "Hijo de puta, son of a whore." He threw a punch. Happy dodged the blow, pivoting away. The wheel went with him. The car veered across the double line, then whipped into a spin as Happy overcorrected. An oncoming pickup veered to miss them. Screech of tires, angry honk. They stalled out, straddling the center divide. Lucky, for a few seconds anyway. A cop, lurking on a side street, maybe 300 yards down, saw the whole thing. Not that the two of them noticed. They were back at it, wild drunken haymakers landing 1 in every 5 tries, but coming fast and hard regardless, only stopping when the cop hit his strobe. They froze. The red light swirled. Happy whispered, "Estoy chingado. I'm fucked." He bolted, throwing open the door, leaping from the car, charging down the gravel roadside berm through weeds to the riverbank, hunting a way to cross. The cop spotted him, a voice calling through the squad car's loudspeaker for him to stop, and the headlights now square on Godo, sitting there, too stupid from liquor and weed to toss the ounce stashed under the seat. It would all play out like a tedious movie from there. The backup units blocking off the road, the chopper with its searchlight, the dogs. Godo would remember the back and forth at the window, the officer with the steel gray crew cut, very professional, very polite. "I'd like to know if you'll agree to a search of the vehicle." By that point, Godo was a fatalist. What would happen, would happen. "I can get a warrant, just a matter of time. I detect a distinct odor of marijuana. Your pupils are dilated. Your companion fled the scene. You were observed driving erratically." "I wasn't driving." "You have gang tattoos." That made Godo laugh. He looked at the backs of his hands, a dragon, a bat. "These?" The cop leaned closer. "Let me explain something to you, son. Here's how it will go. I'm a decorated officer with 12 years' experience working the city, with expertise of particular relevance to the matter at hand. Numerous multi-agency task forces, narcotics unit, youth gang outreach. Am I getting through?" The 2 cops behind him grinned like jackals. "I say those are gang tats. Think any judge in this county is going to second guess me?" Godo's eyes burned. Fearing he might cry, he bit his lip, telling himself, "Don't be a bitch." "I don't care," he whispered. The cop accepted this remark with an oddly warm smile. "Thank you. That's consent. Please step outside the vehicle." Godo watched as they tossed the car, thinking, "Sly motherfucker." They found the pot, but nothing else worth bagging and tagging. No open containers, no crank, no weapons. Half an hour later, the dogs cornered Happy out among the sloughs on the river's far side, hiding in a patch of oleander. He and Godo were taken to lock up in separate cars. I'll never see him again, Godo realized. The weed was a California misdemeanor, no more than a fine for him. His bigger problem would be public intoxication. And even that was just another minor beef, a lecture from the bench, community service, counseling. But for Happy, who had no documents, the pot was an aggravated felony. No matter what any lawyer tried to do, no matter what Godo said under penalty of perjury, the pot was his, no one else's. He'd paid for it, hidden it under the seat. None of it mattered. Happy wasn't a citizen. His case was heard in immigration court, and he drew a hanging judge. Not only did he get deported, he was barred from re-entry for for the rest of his life. Exile for an ounce bag of Godot's blood. It took only one time, looking into Tio Faustino's eyes, for Godot to realize there was no other option. He had to go away, someplace strange and terrible. If he came back, he had to come back changed. And so he headed to the small, featureless office downtown, where the man in the olive green pants, the khaki shirt and tie, the famous high and tight buzz cut, sat behind his simple desk, stars and stripes on one side, Marine Corps colors on the other. I just got popped on a weed charge, Godot said. That going to be a problem? Thank you.